Dr. Clara Bianchi first saw the painting rolled up like a discarded rug on the floor of the deconsecrated church of San Giusto. Pigeons flapped through the rafters, plaster dust drifted in soft spirals, and the caretaker, eager to finish his inventory of salvageable objects, nudged the canvas forward with his boot as though it were trash. But when the cloth unfurled across the flagstones, Clara inhaled sharply. The palette was unmistakable, browned verdigris, a velvet twilight sky, a filigree of gold leaf applied with a master's restraint. It had to be the long-rumored lost altarpiece of Cesare Valdini, a minor but wickedly inventive Renaissance painter whose surviving works hung in dim corners of second-rate museums. "No records place him this far north," Clara murmured, more to herself than to the caretaker. The man shrugged. He was paid by the hour and had no patience for academic astonishment. He signed the release form, left Clara with the rolled canvas, and hurried away for a cigarette. By nightfall, the painting was in the conservation studio of the Uffizi's subterranean annex, stretched over a new frame, humidified, and resting beneath Clara's hooded inspection lamp. Dirt clung like barnacles to the varnish. The subject, though obscured, appeared to be a classic Pietà, Mary cradling the dead Christ, rendered in Valdini's trademark chiaroscuro. Clara felt a scholar's thrill. If she could rehabilitate the work and confirm attribution, her monograph on Valdini would finally anchor him among the second-generation Mannerists, nudging him closer to mainstream recognition. She wrote late into the night, detailing the odor of walnut oil, the weave of the canvas, the nicks along the tacking margins. At 2 a.m., she relinquished her vigil, switched off the lamp, and locked the studio. The corridors of the annex felt like catacombs. As she reached the courtyard, the bells of Santa Croce tolled the half-hour. A breeze slithered between cypresses, carrying a faint metallic tang, as though Florence itself were exhaling secrets. Clara pulled her coat tighter and headed home. The next morning, she found the studio's security door ajar. Her swipe card had logged no overnight entries, and the motion detectors registered only darkness. Yet the door held a thin gap, and one fluorescent ceiling panel stuttered weakly as though something had brushed beneath it. "Faulty latch," muttered Signor Gianni, the building superintendent, when Clara phoned. He promised he'd send a maintenance worker, and promptly forgot. Clara shook off the misgiving and knelt before the painting. She had left it untouched, but the surface looked different. The varnish still glistened under the raking light, and Mary's head bent in mourning as before. Yet, faintly, a new figure seemed to hover behind her. Clara brought the lamp closer. There, no thicker than a web of hairline cracks, was the suggestion of a modern man. Short cropped hair, straight shoulders inside what seemed to be a contemporary suit jacket. The brushwork was impossibly delicate, barely ghosted upon the varnish like breath on glass. She took rapid reference photographs, then wheeled the infrared reflectography rig into position. The scan showed no underlying sketch, no pentimenti, no evidence of old paint reappearing through freshly thinned varnish. Instead, the spectral man existed only on the topmost stratum, varnish that, until last night, had been trash dull with 5 centuries of grime. "Someone must have slipped in," Clara said aloud, though the door log denied it. She phoned her friend Inspector Marco Conti, a cultural heritage officer within the Polizia di Stato. He listened patiently, asked if anything had been stolen, and chalked up the apparition to Clara's exhaustion. "Restoring a painting is like listening for a whisper in a thunderstorm," he said. "Your mind fills the gaps." He suggested coffee later in the week and rang off. That evening, Clara lingered in the studio until midnight, documenting, cleaning, repairing flaking edges. Each time her gaze drifted to the man in the painting, the hairs on her arms lifted. Voila! A Renaissance altarpiece interrupted by a contemporary stranger. An art historical impossibility, and worse, an ethical nightmare. No restorer could justify modern overpainting, yet there it was, thin but undeniable, on her watch. She locked up, paced the corridor, and retraced her steps 3 times to ensure the latch caught. Satisfied, she descended into the courtyard. Wind rattled the cypress branches again, and, from somewhere beyond the walls, a distant siren whined. At dawn, Florence erupted. A banker was found bludgeoned beside the Arno, his briefcase emptied and his throat slit. The newspaper photographs later that morning showed a man in a pinstripe suit sprawled against a balustrade, shoulders straight, hair short-cropped, the same pose as the apparition on the painting. Clara's hands trembled as she compared front-page ink with her high-resolution file. There could be no doubt. The figure that had materialized overnight on the ancient canvas matched the murder victim, down to the angle of his head and the twist of his tie. Clara called Inspector Conti again. He arrived within the hour, trench coat half-buttoned, the fatigue of a night spent at the crime scene etched into the grooves beside his mouth. She led him to the painting. The scanner, the photographs, the security logs. She laid everything out like evidence in a courtroom. Conti listened, folded his arms, and tapped his notebook. "I believe you," he said at last, surprising her. "Or rather, I believe the facts you've presented. But try persuading my superiors that a 500-year-old artwork predicted a homicide. They'll bench me on psychiatric leave." He rubbed his eyes. "We'll keep this quiet for now. If you notice anything else, call me immediately." Clara nodded, but her mind raced. She remembered reading about Valdini's obsession with alchemical varnishes, his experiments with rare resins and metallic oxides rumored to be toxic. One anecdote claimed he'd mixed his paints with blood from executed criminals to imbue his scenes with spiritual immediacy. Scholars dismissed it as lurid myth. Yet the man had been excommunicated for something, a gravitational sin that forced him from public commissions into obscurity. The Church of San Giusto was erected after his disgrace. Perhaps he had hidden the altarpiece there, sequestering his ambitions and whatever malice he'd trapped in the layers of pigment. That night, Clara brewed espresso and settled before the canvas with every bulb in the studio blazing. Midnight ticked past, then 1, then 2. Her eyelids drooped. She awoke at 4:17 a.m., neck crimped, the lamp still glowing. The painting too glowed, but not with Renaissance light. Another figure had emerged beside the first, a woman in a red raincoat, her face turned away, hair springing in nervous curls. She stood on a cobbled street that Clara recognized, the Via della Terma, a narrow artery behind the Palazzo Vecchio. Heart-hammering, Clara snapped photos, then dashed to her desk and scrolled through the city's traffic camera feed, which a friendly archivist had once showed her how to access for research on historical sightlines. Nothing seemed amiss. The street lay empty under sodium lamps. She dialed Conti. He answered groggily but listened as she described the new figure. By 5:15, he'd dispatched a patrol to Via della Terme. At 5:40, they radioed back. A young woman had been found in an alley, stabbed twice, bleeding but alive. She wore a red raincoat. The assailant had fled. Clara felt the floor tilt. Through the phone, she heard Conti barking orders. Call an ambulance, secure the perimeter. But his words dissolved into static in her mind. 2 nights, 2 appearings, 2 attacks. The canvas was not merely predicting, it was scripting events hours before they unfolded. After sunrise, Conti arrived in person with a small forensics crew. They dusted the studio door, checked vents, ensured no ink or paint had been smuggled in. The technicians found no footprints, no fibers, no unfamiliar residue on the painting. They left baffled. Conti lingered. "If this continues," he said quietly, "we'll seal the studio and post an armed guard. But I need something concrete. Motive, mechanism, a suspect other than a haunted masterpiece." Clara, who had not slept, paced the length of the room. "Valdini painted with blood," she blurted, half ashamed of repeating hallway gossip. "He trafficked in esoteric rituals. What if he created a surface, a skin, that still absorbs something?" Prophecies? Conti asked, eyebrow arched. Imprints, Clara replied, like photographic plates exposed to evil intentions. She gestured helplessly. Someone out there plans these crimes. The painting records them before they occur. Or the painting inspires them, Conti countered. A killer gaining access, updating the image to match his next victim. Copycat as performance art. Clara shook her head. No one broke in. The varnish itself changes. Conti's phone buzzed. The woman in the hospital had regained consciousness. She swore her attacker wore gloves, a hood, and said nothing. No clues. He exhaled. I'll install a camera in here, motion triggered, infrared. If the painting updates, we'll catch it in the act, whether ghost or man. He left 2 uniformed officers to set up the gear. They positioned the camera directly opposite the painting, configured time-lapse capture, and synchronized the clock with the station's servers. Satisfied, they locked the studio. Clara, now banned from interfering with the scene, retreated to her apartment. Sleep was impossible. She pored over Valdini's only surviving diary fragments, digitized in a Paris archive. Several entries referenced a vellum of living witness and pigments that answer the heart's shadow. One line, sun-faded and barely decipherable, chilled her. The work does not end when the brush is laid down. It must be fed. Fed with what, Clara wondered? The blood of future innocence. Was Valdini artist or conjurer? The following morning, Conti called with urgency. Come to the studio, now. She arrived to find 3 officers staring at the monitor. The time lapse from midnight to dawn revealed nothing except the slow breathing of fluorescent light. No intruder. Yet the canvas had changed again. Where the spectral man and the red-coated woman had stood, a third figure now occupied the foreground. A gray-bearded priest kneeling before a confessional. His cassock pooled around him, brush strokes trembling with foreboding. The confessional's wooden lattice resembled that of Santa Maria Novella. Conti swore. Mass begins at 7:30. We've notified church security. Clara studied the priest's face. A name surfaced. Father Lorenzo Martelli, the archivist priest who had granted her access to the church's sacristy records last month. He was gentle, near retirement, beloved by parishioners. She pressed fingers to her temples. We have to move him. Conti agreed, but protocols required caution. They'd already deployed a squad car, but traffic near the Duomo snarled at peak tourist hour. Clara couldn't wait. She sprinted from the annex, vaulted onto her Vespa, and gunned it through alleys slick with last night's drizzle. Santa Maria Novella loomed ahead, its marble facade pinking with dawn. Clara abandoned the scooter, raced inside, and found Father Lorenzo preparing the altar. He looked up in mild surprise as she collided with a pew. Dr. Bianchi, are you well? No time, she gasped. You must leave. Now. Words tumbled out. Painting, murders, prophecy. Father Lorenzo's eyes widened, yet he did not scoff. Instead, he glanced at the confessional. I heard someone inside moments ago, he whispered. They wouldn't speak. Clara felt cold seep into her spine. She pulled the priest toward the side aisle. A hinge creaked. From the confessional emerged a tall figure clad in black, visage hidden beneath a hooded camera harness, the kind used by art photographers to avoid touching surfaces. In gloved hands, he held a slim palette knife that gleamed like a surgeon's tool. Don't move, Clara said, voice steady with terror. Her only weapon was an archivist's pencil. The man tilted his head. You saw me before I finished, he murmured, accentless. That complicates things. He stepped forward. Clara shoved Father Lorenzo behind her. Footfalls echoed against stone. Somewhere outside, sirens neared. You're painting on the canvas, Clara accused. Updating it? Hardly. The man chuckled. The canvas paints on me. I merely facilitate. He raised the palette knife. Clara snatched a brass candlestick from the altar and swung. Metal clanged against the blade. Pain yanked up her forearm. Before he could recover, Father Lorenzo hurled a missile at the assailant's face. The moment's distraction sufficed. Clara lunged, collided with the man, and all three crashed onto the mosaic floor. Police burst through the nave. Conti's voice boomed, ordering hands visible. The assailant kicked free, darted toward the cloister door, but a young officer tackled him into the holy water font. Water splashed like a baptism gone mad. Shackles snapped shut. Hours later, in an interrogation room lit by flickering ballast, the man gave his name. Emilio Cassiani, freelance art photographer, formerly contracted by museums across Tuscany. He refused counsel, spoke little, but allowed one statement. "The painting demands truth. I reveal it." Conti and Clara watched through one-way glass. "We found microscopic paint flecks under his fingernails," Conti reported. "Components match modern pigments unseen in Valdini's time. He carried a vaporizable solvent impossible to detect on camera. He broke in, overpainted precise vignettes, then enacted them at dawn." He sighed, open and shut, except for motive. Clara folded arms. He believed the painting required sacrifice. "Do you?" She thought of Valdini's diary. The phrase, living witness. Perhaps Cassiani had stumbled upon the myth, interpreted it literally, and decided to perpetuate the legend for artistic notoriety. Self-appointed medium between past and present. But another thought nagged. Without his touch, would the images still have appeared? She swallowed doubt. "I believe Cassiani exploited a superstition," she said. "But the painting itself remains dangerous until definitive tests prove otherwise." "Agreed." Conti planned to store the canvas in a sealed evidence vault. Before that could happen, Clara insisted on completing one conservation ritual, removing all non-original paint. Under strict supervision, she mixed delicate solvents and square inch by square inch, lifted the thin veneers Cassiani had applied. The banker vanished, then the woman in red, then Father Lorenzo. Only Mary and Christ remained, their sorrow eternal yet uncomplicated by modern carnage. As Clara worked, she felt the painting grow lighter, as though exhaling whatever poison Cassiani had layered onto it. By dusk, she stepped back, exhausted but proud. She documented the restored state, then helped slide the canvas into a titanium shipping crate, bound for a climate-controlled vault. 1 week later, Florence resumed her usual seasons of beauty and petty sin. The banker's funeral drew headlines. The woman in red began slow rehabilitation. Father Lorenzo returned to his parish with a cane and a sermon about vigilance. Cassiani awaited trial, psych evaluation pending. Clara returned to lecturing, her evenings free of spectral apparitions. Yet sleep remained evasive. Images of the painting cycled through her dreams. Mary's features radiant with grief, shadows trembling at the borders of sight. She wondered if she had truly erased Cassiani's additions or merely suppressed them. Pigment, like memory, could be stubborn. Under certain wavelengths, invisible marks revealed themselves. Under others, they vanished. One afternoon, she obtained permission to inspect the altarpiece in its secure vault. Conti accompanied her, curious. They donned gloves, opened the crate, and unveiled the canvas. Mary still cradled Christ, but something glimmered near the horizon line. A faint rectangle, like a door cracked open. Clara switched off the overhead light, angled a UV lamp. Letters materialized, written in crimson too deep for ordinary vision. "Io vedo ancora." I still see. Clara dropped the lamp. A chill rippled through the sterile room. Conti read the letters, jaw tight. "Residual pigment," he said, almost pleading. Clara forced herself to breathe. She lifted a scalpel, tapped gently at the letter's edge. They did not fluoresce like modern acrylics. They absorbed light, blacker than black, as though the painting's pores had drunk something living. She straightened. "Seal it again," she murmured. "Clara, seal it." Conti obeyed. The crate closed with a hollow thud. Locks clicked. Guards signed the ledger. Walking out of the vault, Clara studied her reflection in the polished steel door. In the dimness, her outline flickered, as if brush strokes shaped her shoulders, her hair, the set of her mouth. A figure half-formed on a surface older and hungrier than time. She pressed a palm to cold steel and whispered, "You will not be fed." For now the canvas lay silent. But night was coming, and with it the restless dreams of artists and predators alike. Florence would sleep, unaware that art remained, forever, a witness, and sometimes an accomplice, to the deeds of those who sought immortality in pigment and blood. Clara stepped into the corridor's light, resolved yet haunted, the echo of unseen brushwork trailing her like a shadow no solvent could ever dissolve.